Hey team, it's that time, staff video update, and man, I'm just so proud of you and our team and what God brought to our church this last week. And we were up like 800 people from like the week before, which is incredible. That is incredible. Seeing God bring people from all different backgrounds, I'm celebrating that so much. And I was, in fact, there were just a couple of stories that came in. One of the women from my FBI Citizens Academy class watched online and was totally fascinated. I got to meet a handful of guests who were there for the first time, invited by a friend, family member, or coworker. And after service, I was dressed up like the big bad wolf from the Little Red Riding Hood story with a granny gown on. Yeah, people just couldn't take me serious. It was a delightfully awkward experience. Speaking of awkward, I was talking with my mom just last night. I try to check in every week. They live in the middle of Ohio, about 2.5 hours away. And so it's just my way of saying, hey, how are things going? How's everybody doing? My family all lives together south of Mansfield. And she said, hey, I watched the service this weekend. I'm like, oh, yeah, they tune in. They watch from time to time. They're like, yeah, Halloween weekend. That was interesting. I'm not a real fan of Halloween at church. And I was like, well, that's surprising. Like, we went trick-or-treating as a kid. Like, I've never heard my parents be, like, against Halloween. And I'm like, really? That's surprising. And she's like, yeah, we would trick-or-treat, but we're just not into all of the, like, Satan dressing up. And I'm like, well, I'm not either. She's like, it just was a little weird having that at church. And I'm kind of laughing. And at the same time, I'm feeling like this tension. Maybe you can relate to it. It's like, my mom is disappointed in me. My mom potentially disapproves of some choices that we've made. And so it's like, on the one hand, up till that point, I was celebrating all sorts of Halloween weekend stuff. And then that one conversation like triggered something in me. And it reminded me probably, maybe a little bit of what the disciples experienced. Do you remember when Jesus called Matthew to be one of his disciples, and then Matthew threw a party for him, and they all went over to his house, and the disciples went too? Those other disciples went with Jesus, and Matthew threw this big party and invited all of these notorious sinners. Do you remember what it says happened afterwards? It says that some of the religious leaders complained to the disciples, why is Jesus doing this? Like, the way that I picture it is they have this huge moment, and the disciples are like, unbelievable. These traitors, these sinners are interested in religious teaching. They're interested in following God again. This is amazing. And then they go home. They go home to their mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa, neighbor, coworker, whoever. And they're like, hey, what did you do last night? Oh, we were at Matthew the tax collector. He threw a big party and Jesus was there. And they were like, you did what? With who? Like, that tension, like, how could you even think about doing that, right? And so I think that's probably what the disciples faced as they followed Jesus. On the one hand, we are called to live out the Great Commission. And sometimes, especially in our context, that puts us in weird places of tension with people that we know, that we care about. And so we feel ourselves like not really, maybe it's like, I don't really know what to do with that. And so my encouragement to you would be to make sure that you're finding your approval in being faithful to Jesus. The way that I would say it is Jesus' last words are our first priority. And when you remain faithful to that priority, it's going to put us potentially in a spot where others are uncomfortable with that. So if you have anybody that's like, oh, how could you? And you're feeling that disappointment, disapproval, that internal tension, just know I don't need Halloween Weekend to be your favorite series. And I don't need At the Movies to be your favorite either. But I do hope we all see the importance of living out the Great Commission over these few weeks. I think what it reminds me is that the Great Commission, our mission of introducing people to Jesus, forces me to mature internally, where I'm not living based on the approval of the people around me, but instead am remaining faithful to the mission and vision that Jesus set before us. And so if somebody comes up to me and they're disapproving or uncomfortable, don't take it personal. Don't get defensive. You don't have to prove to them that they're right, you're right, they're wrong. But instead you can hear it and go, yeah, I understand sometimes that makes us uncomfortable. If the opportunity's right, share a story of life change of somebody who showed up or a neighbor or coworker, just like my mom did. My mom, by the end of the conversation, said, you know what, though, after watching your message, there's somebody at work that I wish I would have invited because she's into all of that and she could have heard the gospel in a fun, life-giving way. Like, my mom got it. And so I hope you do too, because I know you're going to be carrying, some of you are going to be carrying that tension past this weekend into the next. And so just wanted to give voice to that. Another tension that we're going to be carrying is the election that's coming up. And I included a video on our app this week just to help people process how to vote, what to think about without pushing a particular candidate and reinforcing why we don't push a particular candidate. And so it may be helpful for you to watch that video, use it as a resource for people who ask. You can also point back to Transforming a Nation as another resource that helps guide how we navigate these seasons, because ultimately we are convinced that it is the gospel that changes human lives, it is the local church that is the hope of the world, and that God has equipped both of those things in us and through us to lead to the transforming of a nation. And government is important, just like businesses are important, just like schools are important, but those things aren't equipped or empowered by God to lead to the transforming of a nation. Only the local church is. They're still important, they just don't carry the same weight, and that's why continuing to stay focused on our mission is our top priority. And so hopefully that's helpful. This weekend, we are stepping into week 1 of At the Movies. The topic is encouragement. And my hope is that you would use this opportunity to encourage your dream team and the attendees that you know, and that you would encourage them to bring a friend with them next weekend after they experience At the Movies. This is one of the easiest places to live out our mission of introducing people to Jesus and the life-changing adventure with Him. We will be keeping our response areas open. And some of you may be scratching your head. Well, nobody's going to know. Nobody's going to visit. The truth is, you may have a lobby conversation with someone where the two of you could go in and just share communion together. You may be prompted, you or the people that you know, to leave something at the cross, to go and light a candle as a reminder of God's light in darkness, as a reminder of God's presence, the Holy Spirit in our life, as a reminder of the passion that we want to have for God. You may want to take communion, go to the cross, any of those things. Have prayer team pray for you. And so we're going to keep those open because we want to continue to create spaces where people can be responsive to God in tactile ways. And so don't be surprised if you see that. And no, I don't expect there to be long lines every weekend at the response areas. I just think it's helpful to keep that in front of people as they come in and out. And so that's all I got for you today. Appreciate you. I'm proud of you. I'm excited about what we're stepping into. And so take a few minutes, if you're meeting as a team or by yourself, to just ask God and His Spirit to use the invites and to use this weekend to help open people's eyes, to introduce people to Jesus, and to help all of us take a next step on that life-changing adventure with Him. Thanks.